Subscribe to Books on Toast, or we really will have to hold you guilty of floxinosi nihilabilification.
Well, hello there, and a very, very happy new year to everybody watching. This is our first video of the year, and we are kicking it off with a very special interview. I'm Sharon.
I'm Anuya, and today we have with us the illustrious and the amazingly articulate, not me, I messed up saying articulate.
It's so
The very articulate Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Guys, have you realized that our level of guests keeps going up, but Sharon and I stay the same level of stupid? In fact, this morning...
You should be very kind to you.
No, both of us. We're both dumb. It's all good. We know it and we accept it.
Okay.
And this morning, when I was doing my morning ablutions, I was like, wow, I get to meet Dr. Shashi Tharoor today. What a great life I have. I said ablutions because you can't say number 2 if Shashi Tharoor is there. So, sir, I'm going to ask you the question that we always ask our guests to kick things off. What are you reading right now?
Well, it's actually a bit of a challenge. I've just finished 2 mammoth books and need to start another, but I'm sort of still contemplating which one to sink my teeth into. I just finished Ramchandra Guha's huge biography on Gandhi, very interesting, and David Gilmour's British in India, which I had to review for an Indian magazine. So that took some doing, because these are both monumental books. You know, they're sort of fatter than mine.
And they're tomes, both of them.
They really are quite substantial tomes. But there's so much interesting stuff being published out there. And every day, or at least every weekend, I open the newspaper. Unfortunately, reviews nowadays are mainly on weekends in newspapers.
Yeah.
I see some book being reviewed that I'd love to read. And then every time my sort of lalach rises, another part of my brain says, what's the point? When are you going to find the time? So that remains the tension.
So when do you find the time?
On planes mainly. Though, and frankly, on planes, I'm also still catching up on newspapers I haven't finished in the morning and magazines to know what the political stuff that's going on is. So reading for pure literary pleasure tends to get pushed on the back foot a bit.
Oh, well. Well, we all know Dr. Tharoor as the parliamentarian, but for people on the internet, they know him as that guy on Twitter who's teaching us all the English language. But for us here at Books on Toast, Dr. Tharoor is the author of one of my favorite books called The Great Indian Novel.
Thank you.
So naturally, this conversation cannot be complete without a question about that book.
And we've spoken about the book in our previous episodes.
We have.
okay.
We have spoken about it a lot in many of our episodes, actually.
Okay.
So it was a great book for me when I discovered it, because I was in school and learning history at that time. So for me to have, be reading this book, it gave me an alternative perspective and actually properly contextualized it for a teenager growing up in India. What our Indian political history is all about, and also Mahabharata. So thanks for that.
Thank you. I'm very glad that it was useful. Actually, it's particularly gratifying because I wrote it now, before you kids were born. And so the satisfaction of knowing a new generation is actually enjoying this stuff is very, very...
It's amazing. It's such a well-written book. So naturally, I would like to know, what inspired you to write a book like that?
Well, the Mahabharata, actually. The fact is I was kicking ideas around in my head anyway, sort of casually. I had a full-time job, and writing was confined to evenings and weekends. In those days, I still had weekends a bit. I happened to be reading yet another translation. I'd read many, but there was a marvelous 1-volume translation by Professor P. Lal of Calcutta. He called it Transcreation of the Mahabharata. And it struck me, my gosh, this reads like a contemporary novel. It's just that it's set 2,000 years ago and the characters are, have slightly heavy names to lift, as it were. But this is actually a set of issues, characters, motivations, behaviors that could be today. And then I started reading more about the Mahabharata, and it struck me, for 800 years, from roughly 400 BC to 400 AD, the story kept being told and retold, various interpolations, various versions. And I said, why do we stop retelling it? So I said, what happened if we never stop retelling it? And somebody in the 20th century was retelling the Mahabharata from the point of view of the great events of his day. And that's what suddenly gave me the idea. After all, Ved Vyas, as the sage, is dictating to our elephant-headed god Ganapati or Ganesh. I decided to have a cantankerous old politician in his retirement, in his dotage and in his anecdotage, dictating to a South Indian secretary called Ganapati, who of course comes in to stay with him, dragging his enormous trunk behind him.
Yes.
So English puns gave me an opportunity
Yes,
to
of course.
As
to
they do all
satirize
of
some
us.
of these. And then I also chose satire
Yes.
because, frankly, the story of the freedom struggle has been told and retold many times. The Mahabharata has been told and retold many times. What's new? And so I thought by giving it satirical treatment, I would actually be able to cast the light of one upon the other in a more original way than if it was a straightforward story. And so I embarked on that course.
For a book that has done so well and has captured people's imagination to that level, so naturally, is there a sequel in the works? Because it really is the kind of book that we deserve a sequel of.
My answer to that is don't spoil the magic. Right? That book
It's a teaser.
stands in its own right.
Okay.
In many ways, I don't know how many mothers there are watching this, but writing or producing a book is rather like producing a baby. And once you've done all the hard work and nourished it and brought it out into the world, ultimately that baby's got to stand on his or her own feet and walk into the world. And that's what happens with every book you produce. After that, you lose control of it. Now, to try and call it back and want to clone it again is not quite the thing I think I should be doing.
Fair enough.
And as you know, I've now published 18 books, and every single one of them is different from the next.
Yeah.
There are no two books that are really identical. And I think part of my evolution as a writer comes from trying different things, but partly also it's to let each book, like each child, have the integrity of their own persona. So this is what the book is. It stands for itself. If somebody else wants to write a satirical novel about today's India, and God knows Mr. Modi's government lends itself to plenty of satire, well, good luck to them. I hope they will, and I hope they'll find the appropriate myth they want to reinvent for that purpose.
So actually,
said
that's a great segue for our next question, which
Right.
is about his latest book, which was published in October 2018, called The Paradoxical Prime Minister. And we have a lot of young people watching our show, and it's 2019, it's the election year. So what would someone who's undecided, say for example, which way to vote, for that person, for that reader, what do they need to know about this book and why should they read it?
Well, I think they should read it for a number of reasons. I wrote it for every concerned Indian citizen. And while it's easy for people to say, oh, this is a Congress MP, so just an attack, actually, I've also got my own credibility as a writer to stand up behind. So I was very careful to write as balanced and detailed an account as I could. The first 70-odd pages, 80 pages of the book are an extended profile of the man. And I deal with all the issues that people admire about him. So I'm not actually just doing a hatchet job. It's very much, and I personally admire the rising up from very hard-scrabble upbringings. He had a tough life. I mean, very few of your watchers, I'm sure, have had to sell tea at a railway station, right? And this is somebody who's made his own future. And I think we should admire that, because there's a lot to be said for that kind of drive, ambition, and hard work. And he's got it. But the book then, once you've talked about the life and where he's reached, talks about what he's done in these 4.5 years as Prime Minister. And when I wrote the book, it was 4.5, we're now heading towards 5. And I'm afraid it's been a tale of unmitigated disaster. Now, again, if people are inclined to say, why would we believe that? That's just a congressman saying. That's why this is a fat book, because it is a detailed, substantial, and substantiated takedown of the errors of the government. There is a section called the Modification of India, which is all about how in many ways the essential nature of our country has been sought to be changed by this government and its policies. There's a section on governance. Remember, this is the man who told us minimum government, maximum governance, and we got the opposite. We now have the most centralized Prime Minister's office since the emergency. And what we're seeing now is actually decisions pending in every ministry because the Prime Minister's office has to clear everything of consequence, including every appointment, every vacancy in the government. It's really insane. And then you've got a section on economics, which I've written for a layman. I've never been very fond of economics, but it's so important because it affects all our lives. And so there's a lengthy section on demonetization and everything else. And finally, there's a section on foreign policy, because many people wrongly think that the photographs from around the world Mr. Modi's jet-setting trips mean that India is doing well around the world. Sadly, our press around the world has never been worse. So given all, since the emergency, so given all of this, I would say that we're looking at a situation in which we've had a prime minister and a government that have done incalculable damage. And I believe that any person who reads this book will say, God, how can we give them a second opportunity to wreck this country even further? That is basically what the issue is all about. And as far as I'm concerned, and going forward, I think that that this book will stand not only as something people should read before deciding how to vote in the elections. I hope that even after the elections, whatever the outcome, it will stand as a sort of monument to these 4.5 years of misrule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your upcoming book, though.
Thanks.
Three states. Of course.
That's a good one. Well, actually, I kind of had a bit of mischief on Twitter about that. Did you see that?
Yeah,
saw
we saw
that.
it.
Digital talaq.
Yeah, so I said,
That's where
no
we were
wonder the
inspired from.
BJP is so upset
Yes.
because the voters just gave them a triple talaq, and that clearly was. Is that our tea coming? Great.
Yes.
So not many people know this, but Dr. Tharoor became a published author at the ripe old age of 10 years with Operation Bellows. And there's also been much written about your reading habits, that you started reading when you were 3 years old.
2.5, I think. I mean, the thing is that it was kind of nuts, but I mean, it's. My mom jokes that she used to read aloud to me every day from the noddy books of Enid Blyton.
Oh my God.
And I just couldn't wait to snatch the books from her hand and read them for myself, so I kind of picked up reading quickly.
Okay.
I was packed off to Montessori school when I was
Okay.
barely 2, so I think I just picked up the letters fairly fast. Yeah.
So what are some of the books that you remember were iconic in, bringing you up and also developing a love for language?
Well, in my childhood, I read everything I could get my hands on. And remember, I grew up in India without TV,
Yeah.
Nintendo, computers, mobile phones. So there were no distractions. It was just
Reading time.
Reading was my escape, was my entertainment, was my education. Everything.
Okay.
So I read madly. But childhood, Enid Blyton, the entire lot, starting off with the Noddy, moving to the Secret Seven, the Five Findouters, the Famous Five, the adventure books, and finally outgrowing Enid Blyton altogether, which was painless in the end because she wrote so much one kind of had exhausted the earth. Loved Richmal Crompton's William books.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they're still being read because they are, in terms of language, a little more demanding
Yeah,
than Enid
yeah,
Blyton is, but
yeah.
they're really superb.
That's true.
And extremely funny, which
Yeah.
is what honed an early
British
taste for humor.
humor, yes.
As a boy, inevitably, I read the Biggles books. Biggles was this character who I think in the early books was a World War I fighter ace.
Yeah.
And then kept on, the books were so successful that he ended up fighting World War II also, and various things in between, even ended up doing something adventurous in the Cold War. But by that time, I had sort of lost interest. But for a long time, that was it. And indeed, Operation Bellows was an attempt to create an Anglo-Indian fighter pilot kind of thing, rather like the Biggles of my childhood fantasies. And then I also read, everything from, you could occasionally get these international books of stories from around the world. I read folk tales from around the world.
Okay.
I read children's versions of some of the great classics. And early on, I developed a taste for reading history.
Okay.
My only regret was that I'm too old to have known Amar Chitra Katha, because by the time it came into existence, I was kind of moving away from comics. But it would have been a great thing to have because of my own interests and
Yes.
tastes. What I did read, however, were the American equivalent called Classics Illustrated, which were comic books of classic novels, classic
Yeah.
episodes of history, and so on. So I did actually read quite eclectically throughout my childhood. And that gave me, one, a love for story, number two, love for words, number three, some sense of humor and enjoyment thereof, and number four, an appreciation of different styles of storytelling, number five, plotting and how to make a story grip the reader. I mean, you always came to the end of a chapter of Enid Blyton and wanted to go on to the next chapter. It sort of both ended and unveiled you into the next one. Your early writing as a writer tends to be derivative. It's derived from what you're reading. And that's the stuff I was reading.
Okay.
And then a little older, I started reading Indian stories as well. So the tales of Akbar and Birbal, Tenali Raman, some of the Rajagopalachari translations of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and all of those things. So all of that came in as well. But again, I'm talking 1960s here, and very early 70s. there wasn't that much available written by Indians for Indians, especially for Indian children. Much of that has improved a lot in the years since.
Naturally. And are there any then hence 4 writers that or 4 authors that you consider would be, you know, your favorite authors?
So,
and then-
yeah, I mean, if you had to go to dinner
Yeah.
with, say, 3 authors, okay, contemporary, who would they be and why?
Well, I mean, contemporary is where you lost me, because who's contemporary? I mean, P.G.
Okay,
Woodhouse remains
dead-
my favorite writer.
dead
But,
of
course.
but you know,
Any-
he died in
any
1975.
I was gonna
William
ask you.
Shakespeare, and he died about 400 years ago, right? I mean, there are some claim he never lived, but I mean, I
Yeah,
think he did.
exactly.
I think it's real.
Christopher Marlowe.
I think he died 400 years ago. Christopher Marlowe was stabbed to death in a brawl
Yeah,
before,
before Shakespeare.
Shakespeare finished writing his
true.
plays. So kind of difficult to
Christopher
believe
Marlowe.
that. Mardia. And then you've got look, I mean, I'm privileged that literally contemporary writers are the ones I don't need to fantasize about, because I've met most of them in literary festivals and public occasions and so on. It's really the ones whom one can't meet, who are really gone,
Yeah.
who you want to turn back and say, gosh, what would it have been like
So who are those?
talking to someone like him? I wasn't joking about Shakespeare. I think he's an extraordinary mind, body sense of humor, great enjoyment of history, all sorts of things that would have made him an enjoyable companion. Woodhouse, because his sense of humor, his intricate plotting, his silly ass characters doing absurd things that bring a smile to the face of the most jaded. I remember my father had his first heart attack. I was battling for life in a hospital. The only thing that kept me sane was reading a Woodhouse novel,
Really?
just to give me something to escape from reality with. It was just he just was great. So I would love to meet him. And then you're probably going to find this a political answer, but I think one of the greatest non-fiction writers of the 20th century, completely underappreciated as a writer, is Jawaharlal Nehru. I mean, if you read the stuff the guy wrote, Discovery of India, his own autobiography,
Yeah.
his glimpses of world history, often without any research material available, no reference library in the prisons he was locked. He only wrote in prison. When he was out of prison, he was too busy to write. So he was writing in jail, and he spent 11 years of his life in jail and produced 6 or 7 really masterpiece books.
That's amazing.
Which I think people should really. I did one essay for a magazine called The Week on Nehru the writer, and I think that if you really want to talk about some of the terrific non-fiction books of political ideas in the English language, not just in India, in the 20th century, Nehru would be right up there on the top.
Okay, superb. Okay, so one question I had was about your writing in general, that you're a true satirist. It comes across not just in your fiction, but even in your non-fiction. And this, of course, show business, which again was like a brilliant satire on Bollywood, which was superb, I thought.
Thank you.
If somebody were to attempt a satire on your life, what do you think it will be about?
And what would it be called?
Look, since I'm not going to attempt a satire in my life,
Clearly, you can't.
I can't. You'll have to find somebody else to do it. I don't know. I mean, the man with 2 horoscopes, perhaps, because I was born in London, and my parents had some Malayali doctor there cast a horoscope for me.
Oh, really?
And news of my birth was conveyed back to the ancestral village, and the family Jyotish, as it were, cast a horoscope. And the 2 don't match at all. So I've been joking ever since I've had 2 destinies. So you can imagine a satirical novel, I suppose, of this guy with 2 destinies playing each other out in sequence. And in some ways, it's probably been true. I've led sort of these 2 very strange lives.
That's true.
And 2 different careers where most of us are like, one is enough, and here he is, ek se mera kya hoga? 2 लीजिए, 3 लीजिए. So we had a question about, so you are of course a celebrated writer, and your sons are both writers in their own right. I didn't
And
find
they're
that.
very good, and I must say they're better writers than I am.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, really? Wow, that's such a good thing.
So why,
You can read
question 1 is, why didn't you name your son, since your name is Shashi Tharoor, why didn't you name them Raj Tharoor and Shami Tharoor? And
Because I was named before any of the Kapoors other than Raj were well known. I mean,
pre-Kapoor,
my
guys.
parents, actually I was named for my father. My father was Chandrasekhar, Chandran. And Shashi is the same thing, the crescent moon on Shiva's forehead. So it's actually, you'll see that in America, every second person is something junior, or the second or the third, right? They keep names down the family. my family was a little more creative, so they simply found the name that meant the same thing rather than just calling me Junior.
Oh, okay. So Ishan and
But Ishan and Kanishk are completely independent names. Ishan was partly an inside family joke in that his mother, my first wife, is half Kashmiri, half Bengali, and north and east.
Yeah.
And Ishan in astrology is the northeast quadrant when you
Oh.
cast the chart.
Okay.
So she found that
Wow.
quite amusing. Plus, we like the sound of the name, obviously.
Ishan.
So, and it's also the first, Ishan is the first name for Shiv in the Rig Veda.
Okay.
So all of these things, and since
Wow.
I'm named for Shiv, that connection was there too. So
How
Ishan had all of these things going into it. Poor Kanishk had a bit more of a challenge. They were both born massively premature.
Okay.
And in the ultrasounds that were tested, he had declined to reveal his gender, so we assumed he was female. And so we had come up with a rather nice female name from an ancient Vedic coin,
Okay.
Nishka. And so it was going to be Ishan and Nishka, and suddenly, no, Nishka, when the genders emerged. And so we first sort of held off on a decision because there was really some questions of whether kids would survive. They were that 8 weeks premature. And in those days, it was touch and go. But then the Singaporeans are very bureaucratic and meticulous, so you have to give a name right now.
Oh, yeah,
And
they do.
so both Minu and I were very fond of Kanishk, the king, who was a very interesting man, had a huge library that rivaled the library in Alexandria, therefore books. Was also the man who convened the Buddhist council to discuss Buddhist theology and ideas.
Okay.
Came to an unfortunate end because he died fighting for the hand of a Chinese princess.
Okay.
But that's another matter. We didn't want to have everything as an analogy, but we like the name of Emperor Kanishk. And in any case, it's close enough to Nishka. You just turn things around and you've got Kanishk. So I just went ahead and did that. And I must say that they both like their names, which I can't say for mine. I was never very happy with my name. But they're happy with theirs, so more power to them. Ishan added an extra A to his name than the one we gave. We gave him Ishan with one A.
And he put two to make it phonetically.
He, unfortunately, growing up in the Western world,
Correct.
he was becoming Aishan to most
Aishan.
people.
Aishan.
You know, like Aishans and
Yeah.
Aishan. So he said, forget it. I'm going to make it very clear what my name is. So he added an A about grade 7 or so, no, age 7 or so, I beg your pardon. And he's now a fine foreign affairs writer for the Washington Post.
That he is.
He's got a daily column that zips around the world. You can click on the internet and get it
We'll
sent
put
to
a
your
link in the
inbox.
description,
Yeah.
yes.
And Kanishk has published an award-winning collection of short stories, Swimmer Among the Stars.
We have it right here.
There you are. And he's working on a novel. So
Oh,
I've
that's
got
superb.
two terrific writer sons.
So you've clearly passed on the writing gene to your children.
Well, her mom wrote pretty well too, but
Oh,
she
yeah.
didn't publish. That was
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the books always mattered to us. My kids grew up watching their parents read all the time.
Okay.
We read out to them from when they were babies.
Right.
And what's wonderful is Kanishk has had a baby this year, so I'm
Oh,
a grandfather.
wow.
as it's
Congratulations.
celebrated.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's a
And one of the
generational jump.
nicest pictures, I mean, of course, they did the same thing of reading to the baby when the baby was not a clue what he was doing. But now my daughter-in-law sent me a lovely photograph yesterday of father and son sitting side by side looking at a book. And so clearly the next generation might still, we hope, discover that. I feel very fortunate that my kids, despite growing up with all those things I didn't have, computers and Nintendo and mobile phones and all of that, are fundamentally book people.
Okay,
And
that's
you'll never
superb.
see them on a flight without a book in their hands. And I'm proud of that because I think books really genuinely give you more
Absolutely.
than any other means of communication. So I'm very pleased that they've got that habit, and I hope they'll pass it on to the next lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the basis of our whole channel.
Yes.
So,
You
yeah.
heard it, children?
Yes,
Keep
now
reading.
you know. Keep reading.
Keep reading.
Yes.
I often, when I'm asked to autograph books, people say, write me a message. I keep reading.
Yeah.
Keep
That's
reading.
the message.
Turn the page, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to the more fun part of
Yes.
this conversation. Not the fun part, the more fun part. And we are going to play a game with you, which is called Warts Leak. And we have
Warts
ripped it off shamelessly from Jimmy Fallon.
Thanks, Fallon. You bro.
Yeah, and
I don't watch Jimmy Fallon, so now I'm really in trouble.
it's okay, not many people do.
It's all right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the rules are very simple. The game is very simple. There are 3 sets of words in front of each of us. We haven't seen them either. Our helpful friends Smriti and Johan behind the scenes have put them together. And the idea is to pick up one of these cue cards, see what the word is, and then use it in conversation as naturally as possible. So you can't force it. You can't suddenly be like mangoes. You have to make it seem seamless. Okay?
So sneak words into conversation.
I
That
love
will
it.
come,
Yeah,
come
Yeah,
at you.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's it. So,
Okay. So
we,
we
were,
should-
we were gonna play Scrabble with him, but then we were like, A, we don't have the time. B, we will get
lose.
thrashed.
Yes.
Yeah,
100%.
Yes. So we're like, let's do something that allows us to live with our dignity intact.
Yes. Thanks.
I hope I can say the same at the end of the show. But all right, should we go?
Okay.
Okay.
I think we should start a conversation and then sneak it in.
Okay.
Instead of.
So the other day I was walking down the streets of Andheri, okay, which is my favorite thing, and I was looking around like coffee shops and stuff, and I'm like, it's been a while since I've had some coffee.
Oh, I
So
see.
I walked in, and then they were like, "There's no coffee here because that's not a real
Right.
thing."
Right. Okay. And then.
Well, I sort of, decided to give her some coffee face. So I was trying to cross the road to join
Oh,
the
I
cafe,
see,
and
I see.
a little bunny rabbit ran across.
Oh.
And I wondered what the bunny rabbit was doing here. And number one, why it was alone, because normally
Yeah.
bunny rabbits only exist in the plural, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
they tend to reproduce in rather great speed. So,
well,
however, clearly was looking for Mrs. Bunny Rabbit. I don't know.
Oh, I see.
So,
Okay. So then I think I met these guys when I was walking down that same road, and we thought, what is new in World? And World is like, there's a stand-up show happening in the basement of this one like weird cafe. And Dr. Tharoor had a free afternoon. Instead of reading, he thought maybe I should just like accompany them.
Starts
and go
looking
for
at his watch.
Yes, go accompany them for this show, and then he went up on stage and did this incredible performance, and it was just a mic drop moment right there. So that was like cool, yeah. And then
So
great stand-up comedian, Shashi Tharoor.
Shashi Tharoor doing comedy is not that paradoxical.
No.
Because he's such a funny man and writes so much satire. I'm winning this game if there was a prize. But
next,
Oh,
Over
that's
to you.
supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
wow,
That's well
of
said.
course,
That's very impressive.
of course. I think then. I don't know how you will go back. Maybe we can get you an auto rickshaw later. Yes. And yes.
Yeah, if you take an auto rickshaw and you get hungry on the way, make sure you stop by a sandwich store, but don't have anything with mayonnaise because that's like it can give you gas, so it's really bad for you.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I see.
Yeah, no, I must say, whenever it comes to mayonnaise, I find myself indulging in floxinosinihilipilification. I just don't like mayonnaise.
Okay.
What is that? What does that
okay,
mean?
okay.
That means the act of estimating something as worthless,
Oh!
which is
Okay,
what
of course, of
mayonnaise
course.
is in my book.
Yes, okay. And well, talking about mayonnaise, the sandwiches are great, and that's maybe one of the things that you should definitely have when you're watching the show called Fargo, because I don't know what Farrago means.
It means a mixture of various things, which is exactly what this conversation has been
Oh,
like.
I see.
And that brings us to the end of this. Oh my God, I don't think we need to edit anything out. It has been a perfect episode on our channel. Thank you, Dr. Tharoor, for coming.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you,
very
Anuya.
much.
Thank you
so
Sharon.
much.
Appreciate it.
This was.
Thank you all, and keep reading.
Keep reading.
Message.
Share this video. You can share it right and you can share it left. Thanks. And also, leave comments in the comment section, because where else will you leave them? And let us know what you thought. Read The Paradoxical Prime Minister. Very important book for our times, especially now. और हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब थरूर कीजिएगा.